So welcome back, everybody. I think we'll kind of get proceedings rolling again. Just want to kind of welcome you all again for this next session and day 2 of our Precision Livestock Farming in Practice conference. Just want to say a couple of big thank yous again. The tech team have really done amazing work, so huge thank you to them, and of course for Ferro in terms of facilities. But a big thank you to all our sponsors again. Just want to emphasize really kind of how grateful we are for their support to make this happen. And thank you all for being here. So we've had a great start to the day. I think both sort of Andrew and Robbie's talks have set the scene on this day 2, following on from a really strong day yesterday and that fine meal at the Royal Museum last night. And now we're going to kind of move to stretching the kind of the international boundaries for the streaming. Really delighted that both before and after lunch we've got our North American connections. So first I'm going to introduce and welcome Dr. Ines Adriaens. Ines is in Nantucket at the moment, so she says hello. She would have been over here, but she's going to be streaming in from Nantucket. Now we managed this actually on a Yorkshire farm yesterday. So we did do a Q&A with Ines, kind of, so I'm not going to kind of say anything else, but fingers crossed. Ines, not content with having one job, has actually got roles both at KU Leuven University in Belgium, but she's principally now at Wageningen University. Her PhD was actually looking at using precision approaches with both progesterone and sensors, looking at fertility management in dairy cows. And she's really been pioneering the use of commercial data, particularly from kind of automated milking systems, to really look at very practical solutions of how we can use those data for some of the sustainability approaches we've been discussing. So I'm really delighted to welcome Ines. She's done a lot of work with RAF these last few years, and she's part of the GenTORE consortium and has really done some groundbreaking work. She was actually over in New York a couple of years ago. We had a 3-day data meeting at the Railway Museum, and Ines really kind of led the way with a lot of that modelling work then. So delighted to welcome Ines, and I will kind of sit over there and over to Ines. Welcome.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Jonathan. I'm very delighted that this is possible, despite that I'm really far away, and I needed to get up very early for this, but that's fine. So today, as Jonathan said, I will speak about opportunities and challenges for livestock sensors, and hoping to guide you a little bit through the work that I've done in the past, making use of commercial data for practical solutions for farmers and hopefully also for vets and for all other stakeholders in the sector. So maybe just a little bit again about myself. Who am I? So I have a master's and a PhD in bioscience engineering, both got from the KU Leuven in Belgium. And I indeed hold 2 positions for the moment. One both are as a livestock data scientist. In KU Leuven, I lead the data team, all working around practical solutions for livestock technology, and then in Wageningen, I'm embedded in the group of animal breeding and genomics in the Wageningen livestock research. So my work mainly consists of developing models, code, algorithm, in which I try to combine biology, physiology, and the technology context, and really make use of real farm data in order to get the most out of it in terms of knowledge and decision support. So in the past, I've worked on a very large variety of projects in fertility, resilience, efficiency, other health, locomotion, and so on and so on. So I hope that gives a little bit idea of my expertise. And then, of course, why do we want to use dairy farms? So will mainly be focused on dairy sensors, because that's where I've been working on in the past. And also the reason for that is that there is a lot of sensors already out there. So we have a lot of parameters that we can measure, that we can use. But for me, it's really how to unlock the potential of the data that is collected by these sensors. It's not about just getting more data. It's really about how can we interpret these data, how can we really use with it such that it's of practical use for everybody who wants to use it. So the big advantage of livestock sensors, in contrast to, for example, the visual monitoring, visual observation, and the more classical ways to go, is that it's collecting data in an automated, in a continuous and objective and simultaneous way. So we can monitor all the cows of a herd simultaneously without the need for very elaborate visual observations that are quite time consuming. So I think the potential is there. But of course, the challenge is how to make these sensor data into meaningful information. So whatever we have, it requires quite some data processing steps. And that is really my core expertise in how to mine these data, how to edit, make sure that we get rid of the noise, then we can visualize it, and we need algorithms and models in order to interpret the data and potentially in the next step also support certain decisions for farmers. So I hope to guide you through a little bit in this area of data processing and highlight a little bit the challenges, but also really the opportunities that still lie there. So you will see that I have a lot of graphs included in my presentation. And what I want to demonstrate or show is that the graphs, or that we need not just to look at raw data, but that we really need to do something with these data in order to extract meaningful information from that. So this is a graph, just one farm with around 60 cows, in which we just look at a daily milk yield. Oops, there is a delay. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm messing around a little bit with the internet clicker thing. Let me go back. I think it's the difference there. I hope it's not going too fast, too often for this. Sorry for that. So I wanted to point out in this graph that we can look at the daily milk production. So this is milk production produced by each of the cows on a farm in a 60 cow farm. And if we align that in date, so in the x-axis, you see just the date, you can get an idea of how good that the herd does. Like an average, you can estimate a little bit, but you don't really know what each individual cow does. So if you don't look at aligning these graphs with days in milk, and normally the slide should change. I don't know. I'm going to okay, there we are. So if we align these in days in milk, so in terms of lactation stage instead of the dates, we really see a pattern of a lactation curve here, which still is very difficult to interpret. So we can see the average dynamics of the herds, but we don't know how the partitioning between, for example, first lactation or second lactation cows are doing. So then we can really look in a higher level. We should change the slides. In a deeper level, and look into how that the model, how that the different parities differ between each other, so the dynamics. So you see higher persistency for first parity animals, lower persistency for higher parity animals, and a higher milk production, which is exactly what you expect, of course. But still, this does not give us information about the individual animals. Smoothing these data already gives a little bit more filtering of what the different daily milk production is, independent of, for example, the milking interval. This was data from an automated milking system. And then we can actually start looking at individual curves. So here in red, you really see the display between of one particular second lactation cow that went through very severe health events that affected her milk production. However, do we already know how to interpret what happened with this cow? No, not at all. So again, if you then look one level deeper, and here you see the green curve is the milk production per milking, so not anymore the daily milking, and the purple ones are the milk production at quarter level. And then you see that actually this is probably a case of clinical mastitis, because you see that one particular quarter is very much affected and even drops to zero production, so it falls dry entirely, while the others tend to recover over time. However, also there you need to take into account at a certain point that the machine, the automatic milking system, can have an error, and the yellow box here shows where there is probably a wrong attachment of the teat cups and where the dried quarter gives or tends to give milk. So it's probably just something that we need to take into account as a modeling as an outlier. So I hope I demonstrated with this example that however you look at the data, it really makes a difference, because you need to filter out the normal variability. You need to detect and correct for normal trajectories, for example, by modeling the expected curve of a certain animal. And then you can start to do the problem detection. And from this problem detection, it's not only about knowing what kind of treatments you want to apply, but maybe also looking into the recovery or looking for culling decisions. Is this cow really too bad? Does she not recover at all? Then we might indeed look into culling for that. Basically, what we want to do is we want to filter out what the expected trajectories, what we expect from deviations when a certain condition happens, and then see how the true trajectory seems to reflect this. And things that we need to take into account there is that normal does not necessarily mean the same. Normal variability can mean, for example, variability caused by the sensor, by individual animal characteristics, by the season, management changes, feed changes, or external factors, I'd say something like weather conditions and so on. So it's really important to make that distinction, that you know what to expect from the data when you look at it. And my own belief, and I think that I've been working on this in the past, really, is that we can really further unlock the potential of livestock sensors via dedicated interpretation when we can stay close to the farm reality and the animal biology. So of course we can develop very advanced, very black box models in which we don't understand anymore what the modeling does. But if we integrate the data and combine different sources of information, we might get much closer and much more reliable interpretation of the data to make sure that we can really use the sensors for automated, continuous, and tailored monitoring and decision support. And so this is a little bit my introduction of the coming presentation, and I hope that I will guide you through what I mean with this, with a whole stream of examples, which I hope are making this statement a little bit more clear. So the first example is the one that I showed you beforehand. So if we model milk yield production, we want to know what the actual expected milk production is in order to detect deviations from the produced, from the expected, and calculate what the losses are. So again, the same example as I showed before. And what we see in the data in milk production is that because we selected the cows for very high milk production, her whole physiology is really dedicated, at least in the high producing cows. I don't speak about other breeds. So it's really dedicated towards this milk production. And if you're going to disrupt, for example, via an external challenge, management change, nutrition change, health issue, you really see those things reflected in the milk production dynamics. Oops, that's one too many. And for that, we really need to get an idea how that the normal lactation curve, the normal expected trajectory of this cow is, given what we expect, for example, from parity and from conditions that we can take into account. So this is an example during a clinical mastitis, and the upper panel gives us the daily milk yield shown in blue, and the green shows the estimated milk production without, so estimated meaning that we don't detect any perturbations in the milk production. This cow has been treated, so we worked on a quite big data set with treatment information, which is very interesting, of course, because it's not always very well kept by the farmers. And we saw that around the treatment dates, you see a deviating milk production, and there is like a perturbation detected in the data. If you then look at the quarter milk yield, which is shown in the lower panel, and at the electrical conductivity shown in purple, you really see that this indeed reflects, so the case of clinical mastitis reflects in the data, and you see an increase in the electrical conductivity, which is what you expect, and a decrease in the quarter milk yield of this infected quarter. Another example, also very nice one, you see really a drop in the daily milk yield around treatment days, a little bit beforehand. So you see 3 days beforehand the milk yield starts to deviate, starts to drop. And the moment that you treat, you see an increase in electrical conductivity and a decrease in the quarter milk yield from what you expect. So I've been speaking about perturbations, but what are these perturbations, or why do we think that this is important? Is if we can automatically detect these perturbations, for example, by comparing and calculating the expected milk production versus the realized milk production, we can really characterize how a cow reacts in her terms of development of a disease, in her terms of recovery of a disease, in the severity, and so on. So it really allows us to monitor how a cow physiologically manages to deal with a certain condition. So this is another example of what we can get from information in the milk yield perturbations. It's again during a case of clinical mastitis. So what you see in the left panels are the suspected quarters. So when a quarter is, so it's a clinical mastitis, so it's one quarter that is infected. You see an average evolution around the day of treatment, of detection, so that's day 0 on the x-axis, and then you see a relative deviation of this expected milk production, and you see that the relative losses, no matter whether it's a hind quarter or front quarter, are rather equal. We see that the relative losses in the suspected infected quarter are much higher than in the non-infected quarters. We see that the variability is much higher if you compare cases amongst each other. So it's cases depending on, for example, the pathogen, depending on the lactation stage, and so on and so on. And we see that the recovery is much slower in the non-infected quarters than in the infected quarters. And we can do something with this information, of course, because if we can monitor the recovery, we could, for example, also adjust the treatments. It doesn't necessarily mean that when a certain quarter has been infected and she already tends to go back to normal, it might be that, for example, no antibiotics need to be used, and so on and so on. So by diving into the different information sources, we can really try to get out that kind of information. So what we can calculate are the milk losses, we can calculate recovery rates, and we can calculate between cow differences and see how resistant that they are towards a certain infection. Second example is the how to use sensor data as proxies for resilience. And I believe that Nick yesterday already spoke a little bit in his plenary about the GenTORE project and how we want to use sensor data to actually detect and predict how resilient a cow is. And a resilient cow, that means that she can be, for example, robust to challenges, that she has a high longevity, high productive lifespan, she recovers fast, or maybe she has a good fertility despite metabolic stress of lactation, or even cows that can be invisible in the herd, so never need treatment, never need attention from the farmer. But the challenge there is really how to measure it, whether a cow will have this accumulated way of dealing with her environment and with the stressors that we pose to her. So what we did was that we came up with a resilience equation, and we really thought, okay, what is the accumulated effect of the resilience of a good resilient cow? And first of all, that is the ability to recalve, because when a cow does not is not in good health, is not robust, is not able to reproduce, she will just not recalve, and she will be culled or removed from the herd. And in addition to that, we also want to measure good fertility, good health, and good production. So that is, for us, the definition of a resilient cow. We can calculate this resilience based on a number of parameters like the number of calving, the calving interval, health events, and the 3 or 5 day milk yield. We can calculate it, and based on data that are actually widely available. On most farms, we have this kind of information available. And we then wanted to see where we can find sensor-based proxies that can reflect these elements so we can measure it in an automated way. And so what we did is we ranked the cows based on the information shown here. And then we looked into what kind of features derived from the sensor data can be biologically meaningful to predict the resilience rank. And so we looked and we developed 30 different features that describe the overall shape of the lactation curve, the variability of the milk yield data, and certain perturbations that includes the characteristics of the perturbations that includes development and recovery phases, and so on. The same did we do for the activity data. So this was daily activity data in which we used a median smoothed model to actually look into the deviations and the changes that, for example, reflect the fertility of an animal. That are the short spikes that you see in the brown middle panel. And then long-term changes that might be affected by health. For example, if a cow really becomes very inactive, it might be that she has a health issue that makes her feel bad and lie more, and so on and so on. And then in the next step was we developed prediction models in which we tried to predict the rank or the score within a farm using these features that we derived from milk yield and activity. And initially, when we started this research, we kind of assumed that on different farms, we had similar physiological reflected features would be determine the resilience rank and longevity and productive lifespan. For example, you can assume that if a cow has a lot of large perturbations and she's really losing a lot of milk, she would stay less long in the herd. And we kind of found that we could predict the productive lifespan and this rank using first parity sensor time series, but that it was not the same features that were predictive across the different farms. And that's kind of an interesting conclusion, because it means that what we develop as a developer and interpreting the data really needs to be tailored at farm level. So this is just a visualization of that. We have the direction of the correlation coefficients, and we see that some features in some farms have a positive correlation with resilience, and other features in other farms have a negative correlation with resilience, and that is not necessarily what we expected. And this is just another visualization of this, and we really see that the data shows us that farmers do not always use the same evaluation criteria. So this is one particular cow who lasted for more than 4 lactations, because the data stopped there. She was not killed at the moment that the graph stops. And you see very, very severe perturbations in which she loses a lot of milk, and still she just gets pregnant. She just keeps continuing in the herd. So is this just not a reason to cull? Maybe the farmer just knows that, for example, this can be a locomotion problem, so lameness, and says, okay, treat it and we're good. And we don't necessarily think that the susceptibility to lameness is a problem to remove this cow from the herd. So third example here is in the body condition score. So body condition score can be measured automatically with a 3D camera. And if we look at the data, we see that first of all, we know as farmers, as humans, we know what we want a cow to have as an ideal body condition score, and that depends on her lactation stage. So on the parity, so the parity and lactation stage. And it's shown by so the horizontal line that you see in the presentation in the graph. We then also visualize the milk production, and we see that the body condition score, which is the green line, shows that this particular cow is really too fat for what you expect her, given her lactation stage. And that she's not only too fat, but she's also getting fatter. So also her increase is more than what we expect from this cow or from average cows in the herd, or what we want her to be. And that is also reflected maybe in our milk production, because the milk production is not very persistent in this graph, or in this cow, meaning that potentially she's just using her energy that she takes, her feed intake, to gain body condition and not to produce milk. So you might need to, I don't know, to adjust her diet for that. This cow is another one. She also has a very much increasing body condition trend, but she's much thinner, and maybe in this cow it is desirable that she, so both cows are not very persistent in the milk production, but maybe for this cow it is desirable that she increases in body conditions trend, and you don't want to adjust that as much. So here it's really interesting to not only look to what you want her to do, but also maybe to look at herd performance. Then a fourth example is about monitoring fertility. So Jonathan already said that indeed my PhD thesis was really about how to predict fertility based on milk progesterone. And the big advantage of progesterone is, of course, that we can not only monitor her heat, for example, as you can do with activity meters, but also really predict insemination time, how whether or not she's facing embryonic death, she has ovarian problems, and so on. And also one of the newer ways to look at it is to see where we can use it for precision phenotyping and really say something about her fertility health. So this is pretty much what the progesterone can reflect, whether or not there is a structure on the ovary. So progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum that develops after ovulation. And we can really detect not only whether she's cyclic or acyclic, but also when the cycles are abnormal or when she's after insemination, she's getting pregnant. So it can be measured on farm, and what we want it to do is, or what an algorithm needs to do before we can unlock the information that is in the progesterone measurements, is how it can deal with normal variability, measurement errors. So we know that, for example, the variability depends on the level. So on lower levels of progesterone, we have low variability, higher level of progesterone, we have higher variability. We also need the flexibility to deal with different cycle shapes. So there is variable cycle length, there's a difference in the length of the follicular phase, the luteal phase, that can again reflect certain problems on the ovaries. We can have different cycle shapes with, for example, steeper or less steep slopes in the increasing and the decreasing parts. And we have differences in the baselines that we want to monitor. So in the coming slides, I will give an example of how to use that in practice. Oh, more slopes that differ. And what we really want to do is to look into, okay, what is the type of model that we can use to actually describe the fertility the fertility shape, and how can we from that give decision support to the farmers. So again, we kind of developed a quite simple 6-parameter model which describes the cycle shapes. It's not very interesting to go into the details of mathematics, but what is more interesting is how this can work to actually detect the different potential possibilities in which or cycle stages in which a cow can be. So the idea is to collect the data, so to sample the progesterone data from the milk and detect when she, after calving, starts luteal activity. And then we fit a model to that. And the middle panel here gives us a possibility to automatically interpret the progesterone data based on what we expect from it. So we start to collect data until we, at a certain point, see that the progesterone drops below what we say a lower confidence limit. And then at this point, we stop updating the model, but we did to find whether or not that a second measurement and a third measurement are out of control, which might indicate that this cow has become has gotten in heat. And at that moment, we want to alert the farmer to inseminate based on, for example, the cycle characteristics that we calculate from the model. Then again, we start to collect data, and we want again to look into luteal activity. So when a cow ovulated, she will develop a corpus luteum, and at a certain point, the progesterone needs to increase. But in this case, the progesterone increase really lasts too long. It almost lasts for 20 days, which is really the length of a normal cycle. So maybe at an earlier stage, when there after 10 or 15 days is still no luteal activity, you want to treat it. And a farmer wants to restart the cycling again, for example, by stimulating this cow with some hormones. Then we start modeling again. We detect again 3 different measurements that are out of control, and we can re-inseminate the cow if we want to, based on cycle characteristics. And then we do the whole process again. Apparently, this cow either got pregnant until now, or we see if she wasn't inseminated, we see that the luteal phase in this time lasts longer than expected. And again, it might be that there has been a cyst being developed. So what we need to do is treat her, after which luteolysis happens, after which we can inseminate, and then finally, hopefully, we can check whether insemination was successful, and this cow becomes confirmed pregnant for the rest of the time. So one of the interesting things here is, so again, here you see a progesterone cycle in blue, so a progesterone profile, and you see the milk production and in the red line, and the green squares are really the moments that a farmer inseminated her. And sometimes, and this is really ongoing research, sometimes we see that the perturbations in the milk yield agree with deviating shapes. So here is in the first step, between February and April, you see a cycle that is really too long. Between March and May, you really see a cycle, follicular phase that is too long. And we see that sometimes health problems that also reflect in the milk yield are also reflect or have an effect in fertility. And there is a lot of interesting information that still needs to be used and further explored. So can we do something with it? Again, another example, we see a perturbation in the milk yield that goes along with a deviating cycle shape. So also there is really an opportunity. Can we combine sensors for interpretation? For example, if a cow goes through a perturbation, maybe it's just interesting to wait with this cycle to inseminate, because the chances that she will get pregnant are really lower than when she's not going through perturbation. So as you have noticed, I've shown a lot of real data examples, and one of the most difficult parts is how we can extract information that we need from the data. And from my part, it's really starting from what do I want to learn, rather than what can we learn. So of course, you can give a lot of information and just overload everyone with information and with data, but sometimes it's good to do the opposite exercise and to say, okay, what is it that I expect to learn from the data? And here you see, and it's really important to, at a certain point, also make explicit assumptions on what we want or what we expect the data to do in a certain case. So in the lower left panel, you see the normal expected trajectory of milk production, no perturbations, no deviations. This cow is just doing quite well without any problems. Then we see the milk production deviation again, in which we had the clinical mastitis case. And then we see that sometimes we also see that there is absolutely no deviation detected. There was a clinical mastitis treated, but it just doesn't reflect in the data. And there is the question, how do we need to deal with that information? The same for electrical conductivity. So normally we just expect the electrical conductivity to remain quite steady. During a mastitis case, we want it, or we expect it to go up. So this is the quarter electrical conductivity, which is really going up and then recovers again. But if the milk production is this low that actually the measurement becomes unreliable, we see that the variability increases, but actually the thing that you are looking for, being an increase in electrical conductivity, just doesn't happen. And so we cannot really look at this information because the information is just not in there, because we're unable to measure what we are aiming for. And here, this is another example from this. If you only look at the milk production at the daily level, so this is again daily milk yield, we have the estimated milk production in green. We know that there is a treatment, and this looks like only 2 days of deviation, but actually it's not more severe than other deviations in the lactation curve. But if you then look at the same animal in the at the quarter level, you see that there is a huge deviation over there, and that not only the quarter seems to be affected quite severely, but also the electrical conductivity does not recover for this quarter, so it really remains high, meaning that you cannot rely anymore on what has happened in the days before to make a decision on what is happening at the current moment. So all these kind of things are really challenging if we work with real farm data, and we can come up with an abnormality of the data, but if you look at day 200, it will not give you the same information anymore in the moment compared to the moment when you start from just where it's around 180, where nothing has been deviating before. So another parameter with another example, we can look at lactate hydrogenase. It's also something that can be measured at the moment in farms. So in a normal situation, you expect that no other tissue damage is present, and you just expect the LDH to be very low. And then during clinical mastitis, when there is an immune reaction, you see that the values go up and then they go down again upon recovery in the middle panel. And in some cases, you see that the lactate, the LDH goes up, goes down again during recovery, but then still remains high above a certain threshold, which means that, for example, this can be either a sensor problem, but it can also mean that this is a more permanent and more chronic infection. And maybe that's what you want to get out of this, because if you know that this cow has a chronic infection and a chronic mastitis, you want to take that into account, for example, when you need to cull cows, because maybe she is not only prone to developing mastitis herself, but also might transfer that to her herd peers. Here, I also want to point out again that sometimes if you rely on milk production and you really have a very severe case, that you have to deal with missing data at crucial moments. So here we see that several days we don't have any data available because the milk production was just not high enough to make any decisions. So if you then rely on the data to make a decision, but it turns out that you cannot measure anything, you're really in trouble. So it's not, it's something, again, that needs to be taken into account. This missing data can be just a sensor problem, but it can as well just be the fact that this cow just has not produced enough milk to measure anything on. So I think one of my last examples, daily activity meter data, we've already come across it in the resilience case. Mainly it's used for heat detection, and what we saw in some of the data sets that we have is that the normal levels can change because, for example, changes caused by sensor hardware. So if you really look into this, and there is a shift that had nothing to do with, for example, how you could think maybe it's pasture, moving to pasture or something like that, but it seemed to have a gradual decrease. So this cow either had, either the sensor hardware had a calibration issue, or this cow just really decreased her activity level over time, which is a little bit unexplainable to me. So it's really important how to interpret these data. And then what you want to detect are these different spikes upon you want to inseminate potentially. But if you then just keep using the same threshold over time, you see that in the square there is a activity spike which helps you to know when to inseminate. But if you look into the spikes that happened around July 2015, you will not be able to use the same threshold. And there again, it's very important to have smart algorithms. You learn from the data and you integrate the expert knowledge that you have as a end user of these sensors. So I think I want to conclude a little bit with with the different challenges that we face when working with sensor data. First of all, I think we need tailoring. Who prioritizes what? It's really a question that we are continuously asking. How are we going to deal with noisy data, noise caused by sensors, by animals, by farm context, and so on? And the more data that we collect, we also have a limitation of data storage and computing power. And again, maybe it's not, so for those who were there yesterday, maybe it's not about having the newest technology, having the most interesting novelties, but really on how can we unlock the data that are currently with more simple, with more cheap sensors collected, and can we really do something with the interpretability? Can we truly understand the data by combining what is already out there? One of the things that need to be stressed is that sensors are not perfect, and that sometimes contrasts to what people tend to think. So the sensors make errors, or milk production just doesn't allow enough milk to be measured if you look at the different parameters. And that makes it that there is really tailoring needed in order to increase credibility, the usefulness, and balance between false and true alerts. So I believe there's really some work to do. We have taken huge steps in the past 10 years, but I don't think my work will end soon. So in terms of opportunities, I think that we have more and more access to smart data processing technologies or methods in which we can learn from different fields and combine different methodological techniques to really unlock the potential of the sensor technology that is already available. My idea is that we need to consider different contexts, different thresholds, maybe also look into the herd information, combine, not only look at what individual cows do, but also what the herd does. Then combine the different data sources. If we can, for example, look at body condition score in relation to milk production or activity features and the milk production features, activity and the progesterone and so on. And that is really important to deepen the interpretation. Also, for example, electrical conductivity for interpreting the mastitis cases and so on. And to this end, we really need subject-specific expertise, because then we can really know, okay, what do we expect the sensors to do and the data to show, and is it really what is in there, and how can we deal with the variability that is in there? And then there is a huge opportunity in tailoring the decision supports to farmers or end users' priorities. So not just saying, okay, everybody needs to do this, but really say, okay, this farmer really prefers to select for animals that have very good health and maybe a little bit lower production, while others might just look into the production and so on. So I think that the data and the sensor technology can be really helpful for monitoring, for decision support, and that there is also an opportunity for breeding, precision phenotyping, and that we need to keep continuing the information or the conversation with the genomic data in order to select for the best animal in environment herd. And with this, I want to conclude. Thank you for your attention. I hope I'm very welcoming your questions.
Thank you. Can we give Ines a big round of applause for this? I just want to say a huge thank you, Ines. Ines had to get up. It was a very early breakfast in Nantucket to do this live, and we're really grateful that you've done it live, rather than a recording as well. So thanks, Ines, for that. And I think we've got time for a couple of questions, and just want to sort of share. It's really exciting to be able to look at data we're already collecting, and we had discussion on farm yesterday about the fact that we're measuring milk. We're measuring milk on a daily basis. We've got accelerometer and activity data on lots of farms, but actually how are we using it? I think it's been really exciting is looking at the way that you are actually looking at a fresh way to actually use those data in a much more significant way. So can I just see if there's any questions from the floor? I think Stuart's got one first of all. You should be able to pick this up, I think, Ines, from the mic. So Stuart.
Hi, Ines. I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much. I just wanted to pick up on your discussion about noise. The brief observation leads into a question, so I apologize. In one situation, we found on a dairy farm that the activity meters were the accuracy of heat detection was dramatically improved by regrouping the animals electronically, not in the real world, but changing the group which I guess the algorithm was using to create the normal expectation for the animal. That leads to, we on farm don't understand what goes into the algorithms, and they're proprietary, so we don't know how we could have solved that problem unless the company had told us. So if that becomes so important, do you believe there is a way forward where these proprietary algorithms can remain intellectual property, but could also we could solve some of those problems as users on a farm? Is there a way of sharing that information without damaging intellectual property?
Well, it's a very good question. And it's always, for me, from my part, it's really difficult to actually protect everything that is software. So the only way that companies can do that is by keeping it secret. I think that there is a huge task in keeping the conversation up, meaning that people from the field and the end users need to keep talking to the how do you say it? To the technology suppliers. And maybe that allows them to just set some certain parameters in the software and saying if there is known solutions for known problems, that the people can actually use those solutions by pointing them out to the field and to the technology suppliers. I don't know whether there is a way to mingle in the, how do you say, in the software itself as an end user, because I know that the technology suppliers are really reluctant to share what they do and how they do it. So it's a difficult question.
Thanks, Ines. I've just got one question. I don't know if there's any more from the floor, but I just wanted to ask, we had a big conversation yesterday on farm comparing the available data and how to use data from robot milking systems compared with conventional parlours. So we had a rotary yesterday, but whether it's a rapid exit or a herringbone. Just interested in your opinion about how easy it's going to be to actually use some of the approaches we've got with data from robot systems with conventional milking parlours. Is that something that you see the same opportunities, or will it be harder?
Well, I honestly, I think that the advantage maybe in automatic milking systems is the level of detail, because you can level at quarter level. But I think actually that most of the things that I've been doing, except for the quarter level data, are as useful for or the concepts at least, are as useful for conventional milking systems as they are for automatic milking systems. So I don't really see how these data are so different, and why there wouldn't be the potential to use it in conventional system. I don't know whether that answers your question.
That's good. I think it's really opening up the fact this is an opportunity for very widely, and that we perhaps sometimes see only for automatic milking systems, but it's a wider opportunity too. I've just got one last question. I think we're going to close. Is just you talked a bit about herd level versus individual level, and I just wanted to ask you where you see the kind of the opportunities for, herd level kind of support as well as individual decision support.
It's also very interesting. I think that we can really combine individual level data in order to say something how the herd is doing, and it's about disease incidence. It's about how to deal with challenges. For example, challenges that affect all the different animals. For example, heat stress, more and more a problem in the last years. Behavior analysis. Is there something that maybe changes over time at herd level? So I think for health monitoring, there is definitely an opportunity for performance monitoring as well. With the different sensors, we can really look into how that the averages and the variability change within a herd, and learn something about the challenges that they need to face at a certain point. And I think that there is, and that's very simple. So mathematically or methodologically, it's very simple to do, but just I feel there is too little work. There is a lot of stress on the individual animal, but for me there is quite simple solutions combining individual data at the herd level and comparing it with previous time frames. So it's really about comparing windows of time that can give us information about the herd performance, herd health, herd incidence rates of certain diseases and so on, by simply combining the individual information. So there is a huge potential for my part.
That's great. Well, I think we just want to say really a big thank you to Ines. It's a bit early in the morning in Nantucket, but there's actually some Yorkshire pies that are waiting here at lunch, and I can feel the smell just wafting through a little bit now. So I think we should say a huge thank you to Ines again, if we could, very much for doing so. Thanks, Ines. We'll obviously link up further, and we're going to break for lunch now. It is Yorkshire pies. They're available kind of downstairs, and we'll reconvene again at 10 to 2. So back here at 10 to 2 for the afternoon sessions. Thank you all, and enjoy lunch.